Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel, Kalanati. Today I'm going to talk about my first batch of Otherwise Award winners I've read recently. This is for my Otherwise Award winners project, and if you don't know anything about this or the award, I will link for you my project kickoff video. But in short, the Otherwise Award is for interesting depictions of gender in speculative fiction. I think there's a bit more to it than that, but that's how I think of it. So today I have 4 of the winners to talk about, and most of them are within the last decade or so, since I'm trying to read the most recent ones first this year. There's one exception to that though. I'm going to talk about these in reverse publication order because that's the way I have them listed out. It's not the order in which I actually read them though. Let's begin with the most recent winner from 2019, Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. I am really surprised but also very happy that I enjoyed this book and I got much more out of it than I thought I was going to. I had heard about Emezi before, in particular Pet, which is their second novel. Freshwater is their debut novel, and I had already heard that it has some content warnings. It does deal with sexual assault and rape and abuse and mental illness, and it's some pretty heavy subject matter there. So when I started reading this, I thought that it was going to be very difficult and I was going to have to take my time reading it. And except for a few sections where I kind of held the story at a distance in my mind to get through it, it was a very compulsive, compelling read that I finished in 2 days, and when I was done with it, I really wanted to read more by Emezi. So this story is about a young Nigerian woman named Ada, or Ada. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce her name. I'm gonna say Ada. She is from Nigeria, but she actually spends a lot of her time in the US going to university, and she is Ogbanje, an Igbo term for like a spirit child or a demon child. I think the literal translation that Wikipedia says is the literal translation is like children who come and go. And it's this like idea of children who are born into the world with spirits in them that cause mischief. And it kind of creates this repeating cycle of pain within a family, this child that is troubled and causes mischief and dies young. I may not have completely understood this concept of Ogbanje, but it is what the story is about actually. So Ada is born with spirits inside of her. They call themselves like the brother sisters, but it doesn't happen the way it's supposed to. Instead of being fully integrated with her flesh, the spirits are kind of disconnected in a way. They don't completely control Ada's body in the way that they were promised. And yet, the story is very much about this relationship that Ada has with these spirits, or kind of like other personalities inside of her that do emerge to control her body at different times. So I think there are 2 major ways of looking at this story. There are probably more, but this is kind of the way that I looked at it. I found the story very interesting, perhaps more interesting to view it as a metaphor, that this aspect of Igbo mythology isn't real, it's not what's truly absolutely happening, but it is this metaphor, this belief through which to view Ada's journey with her mental illness, with trauma from abuse, and with her gender identity. But the other way of looking at it is that, why yes, this is speculative fiction. It's not literary, it's not contemporary, this is fantasy. These spirits really do exist. And that is also very interesting to read. But what I mostly got out of this is a very different set of beliefs, a very different cultural viewpoint for viewing and understanding and dealing with mental illness, like a dissociative identity mental illness. It's incredibly different from Western medicine, from the Western way of seeing and understanding mental illness. I thought that that was the really important point of the book that I wanted to take from it. And it is heartbreaking in places. It's very difficult to read in places. And I think the only 2 things I would criticize this book for is that, or from my personal experience, is that one, I had to actually keep some of it at a distance. I wasn't able to like pull it in and internalize it and really immerse myself in parts of the story because the subject matter was just too much for me. And I found it, difficult enough to read it, even keeping it at a distance. And that's just me as a reader, my own personal experience. The second thing is that I think this is a really well-written story. This is a great debut novel. Emezi can write, and they have a way with words and language and expressing all of this. But there were some points in the story that I thought were unnecessarily obfuscated by the pretty language. It gets a little bit too stylized in places, and I wanted more clarity to understand what was actually happening. Combine that with the fact that you have basically an unreliable narrator telling the story, or a set of unreliable narrators. And so I often came away from certain things thinking, did that really happen? Is this literally what happened? Or is this an interpretation of what actually happened, or is it just an outright lie? I don't know. Because if I didn't mention already, the story is not told from Ada's perspective. I think in the entire book there's one chapter that's from Ada. The rest of it is from the brother sisters, the spirits, and most of those are split between like all of them talking at once and the one dominant personality, Asuhara, talking. And then I don't know if there's actually any part of it from St. Vincent's, but Asuhara is like the main personality that emerges, which is, I think, female and very sexual. And St. Vincent is male and doesn't emerge so much, but becomes more important in the second part of the book, which becomes more about like gender identity. So it's not really from Ada's perspective, it's from the perspective of either other spirits inhabiting her body or from her other personalities, whichever way you want to view it from. So yes, a really interesting novel. I'm quite glad that I read it. I'm glad that I didn't gloss over it or skip over it because of the subject matter, and I will definitely try to read more by Emezi in the future. I'm very curious about their other books. Next up is the 2018 award winner, They Will Dream in the Garden by Gabriela Damian Biarevete, translated by Adrian Demopoulos. So this is a short story. It's actually available for free online, so I will link it down below in case you would like to read it for yourself. And I thought this one was okay. I don't really have that much to say about it. As far as I could tell, it's set in the future in Mexico, and it's about this garden where holographic or digital representations of women exist. They're basically murder victims, assault victims, the women over time who have disappeared and been lost or forgotten about due to, systemic sexist violence. So it's kind of like a memorial to these women to not forget them, but also the story is about bringing a group of school children into the garden to interact with these representations of these women, these victims, and the lesson that they're supposed to learn from that. And I get the point, I think, but I actually think that this idea of gathering together everything you knew about a person and then creating them again as a digital version is actually a terrible idea. There have been, science fiction stories that explore this and point out how awful it can be actually, but the fact is you're bringing somebody back without their consent, without their knowledge. Some people may really want to be remembered this way. Other people may not want to have their image and their personality and their life living on forever outside of their control, outside of their family's control in this sort of situation. So I think the point of the story about the past and not forgetting it and learning that lesson was a good point, but I didn't really love the premise. I didn't think that it would actually work that way or that it would be the best way of going about memorializing these people. So it was all right. I would like to read more by Biarevete. I don't know how much of her fiction has been translated into English though. Did I say I had 4 to talk about? I have 5 to talk about today. I can't do math, it's too early. So next is the 2016 award winner, When the Moon Was Ours by Anna Marie McLemore, one that I was really looking forward to because I've heard great things about McLemore's fiction and style in the past. I didn't like this one. Let's cut to the chase. I did not enjoy the genre of this or the writing style. I liked the story though. So this is magical realism. It's a young adult novel about a trans boy and his love, a girl who grows roses out of her wrist and who was discovered when the locals took down a water tower and it broke open and she was inside of it. You could tell already, the magical aspects of this, the whole magical realism thing makes no sense to me. I am way more logic-based and literal-minded than I think you need to be to really enjoy magical realism. So I'm not going to criticize the genre of this. I will criticize the writing a bit though. I thought the prose was purple, guys. Some people love this flowery language. I think it was simply too much. It was a bit repetitious as well, the same things, the same metaphors being repeated over and over again. I felt like it wasn't always trusting me to remember things that it had already said before. And then it was just flowery. So many similes, so many metaphors. I just couldn't take it. Which was difficult because I actually liked the story, the plot here, about, you know, a trans boy trying to live his life and to be what he wants to be, and realizing that it's not just a phase, it's not just a thing that he's exploring, this is his identity. I really liked that part of the story. Even like the young love aspect, the kind of the romance between the two main characters, I also liked. The whole thing about Las Gringas Blancas, like the family, the Bonner sisters, the four sisters who are the white beautiful girls who twist all the boys in town around their little fingers, and one of them wants Samir, the boy, the main character. I did not like that whole like mean girls aspect of the story. It felt unnecessary to me in some ways and kind of a stereotype. But the point of it, you know, what the experience that these young people have with their identities, with their gender identities, with their sexual orientation and everything, oh, it was really sweet, and I wanted the best things for these characters, but I did not really enjoy the packaging of the story, I guess. So I read it, it's a thing. I have a feeling I won't really get along with any of McLemore's other stories if the writing style is very similar. I'm not sure if this was their first novel or not. I think it might have been, so later books I might get along with better, but I think I'm just gonna leave magical realism alone for now. So the 2009 award winner was Oku, The Inner Chambers, Volumes 1 and 2 by Fumi Yoshinaga. I've read Volume 1 and I'm still trying to get my hands on Volume 2. So I'm going to talk about Volume 1 really quickly here. This is historical alternate timeline manga, which is really interesting. I didn't realize until I got this that manga or any sort of comic had won this award, and I think it's really cool when things that aren't just novels win awards and are considered like on par, you know, in the same playing field as a lot of novels. So I liked this. There's one thing I had trouble with, but in general I liked this. So it's set in the early 1700s. I'm forgetting the name of the Japanese era, but it's set in historical Japan and imagines what the country would be like if a plague had killed most of the men and the majority of the population were women, and now women inhabit most of the leadership roles, the powerful roles in society, though they do so usually under male names or male titles. So the shogun, for example, is a woman. And the first part of this first volume is the story of a young man who decides to enter the inner chambers, kind of like the shogun's harem in a way, to serve, and then his encounter with the new shogun and what happens. And then it kind of segues into the new shogun's questions about what's going on. She has heard that in the past there were as many men as women, and she wonders why, like even in her position, she has a male title, and that when women assume certain roles, they take on male names. Like, why is that? If women are in power, if women are the majority, why do you do that? So she's starting to question history and why society is the way it is. I thought this was really cool, actually. I had never heard of this series before. I didn't know what I was getting into, and I was very swept up in it and swept up in this very different, older culture and everything. The one thing that completely threw me at first is that the archaic language that people are speaking in this historical period, like 300 years ago, is rendered into English as Elizabethan English. And I say Elizabethan because I recognize certain, exclamations and grammatical constructions and stuff from Shakespeare plays. And this, I understand why this was done. I think it's actually a smart decision to translate a lot of it into old-fashioned English, because you're trying to convey the class system as well as the history and everything. So you have the like informal thou and thee pronouns that really help with that. So I understand the decision in the translation there. It makes a lot of sense. However, if you've experienced a lot of this like 17th century English vernacular, you'll probably heavily associate it with things like Shakespeare plays and Elizabethan England. And it was this cognitive dissonance of Japanese people speaking Elizabethan English. And I really struggled with it at first. I got into it, I was really working to get past it, but it just really disrupted the beginning of the story for me. It seemed like a really big mismatch, like a cultural mismatch with the actual setting of the story. That aside, I thought it was a very interesting premise, very interesting to see this like gender imbalance society premise done by a non-Western writer, because this is actually a very common scenario in a lot of feminist science fiction written by people like Le Guin or Tepper, and I've never seen it done by, a non-Western author. So very interesting. I can't wait to read volume 2, because that one also won the Otherwise Award. I will talk about it in a future batch wrap-up as well. The other winner that I'm going to talk about today is The Outlier. This is the 2000 winner that I went ahead and read because I owned a copy of it. And it is Wild Life by Molly Gloss. I have loved Molly Gloss's books so far this year. This is not my absolute favorite of her books, but it is written so well. It was a really good read. So this story is set in 1902, and it follows a woman named Charlotte Drummond. She is a radical feminist. She's also an author who supports her family with her writing, and she's the single mother of 5 boys. And this is the story of kind of a transformative experience that she has when she goes out with a search party to look for her housekeeper's daughter who was lost at a logging camp. And Charlotte becomes separated from the search party and herself becomes lost in the wilderness. She spends about 6 weeks on her own, struggling to survive, trying to get back home. It's a very harrowing journey, but also, like I said, transformative. This is an experience of the wild life that women usually would not have. And she eventually takes up with a band of Sasquatches before, as you might expect, being rescued. I think that this book is actually trying to draw a parallel between environmental issues and wilderness and the destruction of wilderness by men, and feminism and what experiences women are allowed to have or supposed to have in this time period. I think it's really important to note that Charlotte has this adventure, as awful as it might be, in the wilderness. She gets to experience the wild life, and she's criticized for that. Like, she beats herself up about like not being there for her family. She's like abandoned her children. What kind of mother is she? But if a man were to have the same experience and to seek it out consciously, he's brave, he's an explorer, he's gonna find things, you know, like he's gonna conquer the wilderness. She's just there experiencing it, and it changes her, you know. But it's not the adventure that women are supposed to have in this time period. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on in it. I really enjoyed the ebb and the flow of the story and what was happening in it. It's written beautifully, but I found it difficult to super love Charlotte and her particular journey. That is it for this particular batch of Otherwise award winners. Do let me know if you have also read any of these, or if you want to, leave me a comment down below. I would love to hear from you. I'm very happy with how this project has gone so far. I feel like everything I've read this year for it has been very interesting, or taught me something, I guess. And you know, even the one that I haven't super enjoyed, I got something out of it, and I love that feeling. So I am on to the next batch of books for this project, and I will hopefully come back with another wrap-up in the not too distant future for you. I'm very excited about this now. And yeah, that's it for me today. Hope you enjoyed, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.